Good evening. If the Green Movement were a religion, and sometimes its more dogmatic adherents make it sound as if it is, then being anti-nuclear would be one of the 10 commandments. But today, in an article largely devoted to encouraging protests against the new coal-fired power station plan for Kent, campaigner George Monbiot declared that the fight against coal is so important, the question of nuclear no longer much matters to him. Well, during these hard times, when many of us worry much more about the cost of food or fuel and power than saving the planet, we'll debate whether this marks a turning point for the Green Movement in Britain or even potentially a serious split. First, here's Andrew North.
Here in this windswept field in Kent, climate change protesters have been gathering for their latest showdown over a new coal-fired power plant planned nearby.
You shouldn't be climbing over this fence, should you? Why not?
But amid a siege-like atmosphere, with police swamping the area, and protesters feel they're trying to send them a message.
You've got to ask yourself why. Why is the government so scared of us? Are they just doing what E.ON's telling them to do, or is there something bigger here about the fact that, the government says with one hand climate change is a huge priority, we have to act on it now, and on the other hand is doing its absolute utmost to prevent us from actually doing that?
What are you hoping to achieve with the climate change protest?
We're trying to publicise the dire need for somebody to do something, particularly the government, to get these coal-fired power stations closed because they're causing climate change.
With the heavy police presence here at this climate change protest camp, there's certainly a sense of the Green Movement under pressure. But increasingly, with the economic downturn biting, that's coming from the wider public too. In the past 18 months, the proportion of people rating the environment and climate change as the most important issues facing Britain has halved, while at the same time public disquiet about fuel prices has rocketed.
People value security of electricity supply. I think the next thing that's important to them is the price of it. And a lot that's going on at the moment on the environmental front is pushing up the electricity industry's costs. And this is reality. Not everybody wants to accept that.
But climate protesters say spiralling energy prices are a symptom of the problem they're trying to address.
The energy costs is very interesting because we've kind of structured our economy on the assumption that we're going to have ever-increasing sources of cheap fossil fuels. And this is just one aspect of the madness of trying to maintain a world of perpetual economic growth in a world of finite resources. So, I mean, it's just the contradictions in this type of approach to the way we structure our economies are coming more and more to the surface. So, I mean, something's got to give because we can't go on indefinitely like we have been going.
Proponents claim the technology in the new coal-fired plant planned for nearby Kings North Power Station will produce lower emissions. The problem is that overall carbon output from the power industry looks set to keep going up. In the developed world in 2002, electricity generation alone produced nearly 4,800 million tonnes of carbon. By 2030, that's projected to increase another third to almost 6,200 million tonnes. Today, a veteran of the environmental movement, George Monbiot, writing in The Guardian, seemed to acknowledge this, saying it's time to consider the nuclear option.
I have now reached the point at which I no longer care whether or not the answer is nuclear. Let it happen. We can no longer afford any rigid principle but one, that the harm done to people living now and in the future must be minimised by the most effective means, whatever they might be.
For most in the environmental movement, though, going nuclear is still very much a red line. And they say missing the real issue.
One of the most important things we need to do is to learn to reduce consumption, and I think that one of the reasons for saying nuclear is necessary, renewables will not be enough, is that it's when we actually look at maintaining the levels of consumption or even increasing the levels of consumption, because that's the mentality, so we need more.
But if well-known environmental campaigners like George Monbiot are saying nuclear may be the way to go, isn't this a sign of the environmental movement having trouble deciding what its message is? There's a split in the movement, isn't there?
No, I don't think that there is a split in the movement. I think that these are difficult questions, and the environmental movement is diverse, and we're working through together collectively looking at the difficult questions, and I think that actually it's a really good sign that there is not a party line and that everybody agrees, everybody just does and says the same thing.
The government has already put its weight behind building new nuclear power stations. to replace ageing reactors, but it will take years for them to come online. This is how we currently generate our electricity. By 2020, if no more nuclear power stations are built, its share will drop to 6%. Up to 90% of the gas we use will be imported as North Sea supplies run out. The government's ambitious target is to increase renewables to 20%. But even if they meet this, it will barely cover current demand, let alone allow for any increase.
We may well see more railway electrification. We will probably see much greater demand for air conditioning. We will probably see the introduction of heat pumps, highly efficient, but they require electricity. We may well see the development of electric cars. This, to me, signals that electricity is actually going to be much more important in our energy future than it has been in the past.
There were clashes yesterday at the climate camp, with protesters complaining of heavy-handed police tactics. But the Green movement may now face a bigger challenge, selling its arguments to a public more concerned with the economic rather than the global climate.